Yeah, welcome everyone to the Fellowship of the Feed, a migration journey with ProGet and Chocolatey. Today's agenda, right? So we're mostly going to walk you through how to confidently migrate from Sonatype Nexus to Inedo's ProGet using ProGet's built-in integration, built-in migration tool rather. So you're going to learn how to preserve your package infrastructure, avoid business disruption, and gain enterprise-ready features, all without the headaches of manual migration or steep licensing costs. Um, but with this being a joint webinar, we're not sure, how familiar people are with either Chocolatey or ProGet or both. So we're definitely going to talk about both of those in a little bit of detail so that you can be familiar with sort of the problem and solution space and what Chocolatey does, how ProGet helps, and then sort of how to use ProGet and or how to migrate from Sonatype Nexus to ProGet so that you can use it effectively with Chocolatey. Um, we'll start with a quick, like I said, there'll be a demo that Steven's going to do of showing that demo. Let's start with a quick introduction. Steven, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Steven Valdinger, Customer Solutions Manager here at Chocolatey. Been in this role for a little while now, been with Chocolatey since 2019. And my job is to make sure that our customers are happy, that they're getting the most out of Chocolatey, they're getting the most out of the tools that we provide for them and the tools that they use alongside us. So Inedo ProGet being one of those, Sonatype Nexus being one of those. Really looking forward to providing this webinar to everybody that's here. So thank you.
Cool, cool. And I'm Mike. I'm the COO of Inedo. Been with the company a long time through all of our different permutations. Um, I work with our enterprise ProGet users as well as the users of our other tool, Buildmaster. We're not going to be talking about Buildmaster today, but that is a separate tool that we've created. I work with our kind of major installations of both of those tools. Um, of course, small company, self-funded, bootstrapped, and proudly. We do get inquiries from potential users all over the world asking for more information, a demo. Can we talk to someone? So if it's EMEA or the US or our hemisphere, I handle those. I definitely also oversee some of our marketing related projects, such as like a webinar such as this, our previous Chocolatey webinar, our software composition analysis webinar, um, things of that nature. And my personal life, I'm married. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a brown belt in that, and I have two dogs, Two-Bit and Callista. You can find me on LinkedIn. Mike Goulis is my last name, and happy to chat and meet anyone there. So to dive in, right? So obviously, a lot of people probably are already Chocolatey users, but maybe not everyone, and maybe not everyone is so familiar. So I know many people are maybe thinking, do we really need an introduction to Chocolatey? We think it's important to kind of establish the problem solution space of what Chocolatey solves, why you need a package repository like a Sonatype Nexus that's been mentioned or ProGet. So we're going to kind of go through that just to make sure everyone is sort of fully familiar with the situation. So we also kind of can't help but think that even if you're a regular user of either Chocolatey or ProGet, many users may mainly interact with Chocolatey through the friendly UI or automation scripts and don't necessarily know how all of the pieces fit together, especially when it comes to using Chocolatey in an enterprise environment. So before we get into sort of the private repository, ProGet, the demo, let's get into that quick problem space, talk about Chocolatey, how it works, what it does for organizations. So Chocolatey is a Windows package manager that automates software installation, updates, and config management by a or through a command line interface. That kind of course, opens the door to the question: who writes these scripts that automate the software installation, updates, and config, right? And the answer to that is that the Chocolatey Chocolatey and its community members do. So, chocolatey.org is an open source community providing pre-built packages, enabling Windows sysadmins to automate software installation, updates, and configuration management without the need to write complex scripts. Chocolatey community is essentially an open source community similar to NuGet or PyPI or NPM. Community members contribute by developing and reviewing Chocolatey packages, which means each script undergoes multiple checks. So this reduces the risk of errors that might otherwise be missed in a solo project. With Chocolatey employees acting as package maintainers of many of the community packages, many of these packages go through stricter quality and security checks. It's also worth mentioning in its commercial version, Chocolatey also offers a central place to manage your licensed Chocolatey endpoints. So I'm going to show you real quick here. This is the Chocolatey community repository. It's a public catalog of over 10,000 packages for popular Windows software. Obviously, it's similar to a public app store like Google Play, but it's, obviously mostly centered for IT admins and developers. You can install any of these packages that have been listed here with a single command using Chocolatey. These packages are maintained by the community, so while it's convenient, it's important to validate them before you use them in production, which is something we'll definitely talk about a little bit later. Let's take a look at a specific package and see what kind of info is available. So this is our own tool, ProGet. It's here in the Chocolatey repository, so to speak. It's right here in the Chocolatey community. Um, so you can see that you have the install command, package details, version history, and metadata like license and dependencies. So you can see all that's available here for our tool ProGet that obviously Windows sysadmins would potentially want to add. So now let's look at what a script looks like. So here's what a typical Chocolatey package actually does under the hood. So you can see that Chocolatey packages are PowerShell scripts bundled with metadata. Most of the time, they don't include the installer itself, and instead they contain a URL that points to the official website of the software vendor. Usually, this is a direct link to an .exe or a .msi installer file, and this usually works fine until it doesn't. So we're going to kind of talk about the challenge space here. Um, so we're going to talk about the importance of internalizing and privatizing packages, right? So it's a very important consideration in more of an enterprise setup. So chocolatey.org is an incredible resource, and most of the community packages, as I mentioned, are maintained by responsible open source contributors and even some of the Chocolatey team themselves. But it is important to remember it is a public volunteer maintained repository, and that includes two important implications. So the first is, there aren't guarantees, right? Even a well-meaning update to a package could accidentally break something, or at worst, a malicious actor could slip in a dangerous PowerShell command or something like that. The second is just in general, you're relying on the internet to be up and running and for your internet to be connected and all of that stuff with your service provider. So consider that if a script links to an external URL for an installer and that vendor pulls the file or moves it, or your internet is down for the moment, then that package would break and not function as you intend. Um, Another consideration is also that not everything you might want to use is on chocolatey.org, as exhaustive as it is, right? So your internal line of business applications are obviously not going to be there. And, some of the older or less commonly used commercial tools may not be in chocolatey.org, or they may be missing or no longer maintained. So a solution to that is to do the following. It's to internalize the packages, which is to say, save the Chocolatey package and the installer to a location that your organization controls, and then to privatize. And privatizing, in essence, is using a private repository like Sonatype Nexus or ProGet, our tool, to serve those packages reliably and securely across your environment. Obviously, that lets you curate what's allowed, prevent tampering, and keep things working even if the internet is down or the vendor changes their site. So, both of these are foundational steps to use Chocolatey safely and effectively at scale for, again, some of those, enterprise level installations. Um, so far, we've now talked about how internalizing and privatizing packages is essential for enterprise environments. Mainly that's from a security or a stability perspective, but it's also worth mentioning that it's a huge win from a performance and reliability standpoint. So when you host the packages internally, installations are served from your own network, which means they're much faster and they don't depend on external HTTP downloads. That also means that you're not affected if chocolatey.org or a vendor's site goes down, or of course if they remove an installer link. Everything in your sort of state still works because you control the source. We'll talk now about how Chocolatey for Business offers features that complement the internalization process. So C4B, Chocolatey for Business, adds several key enterprise features that complement the internalization process. For example, it includes tooling to automatically internalize packages, so downloading the installer and rewriting the PowerShell script so that it points to a local resource. It also introduces policy enforcement, logging, and integration with tools like SCCM, Puppet, and Ansible, which makes it easier to manage Chocolatey deployments at scale. It supports air-gapped environments, which are in a lot of cases critical in different industries. I get a lot of inbound inquiries for ProGet, potential ProGet users who want to do an air-gapped environment or need to for regulatory compliance reasons. Um, so all of those are ways that Chocolatey for Business helps complement the internalization and privatization process. But it is important to point out that Chocolatey for Business is not itself a private repository, right? It gives you better tools to create and use internal packages, but it's not a place to store, manage, or serve them across your infrastructure. That is why Chocolatey for Business is typically used alongside a private repository such as our tool ProGet. So Chocolatey provides the automation and policy layer. ProGet provides the package hosting, access control, and visibility you need behind it. Of course, another benefit is no rate limiting, and we will talk about that in just a moment. So with that, we've established that it's wise to internalize and privatize your packages, and that you need essentially manage package repository to do so. Historically, many Chocolatey users have used a competitive tool to ProGet called Nexus by Sonatype. Uh, it's also a private repository. Many users are on the community edition. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it's worth noting that recently Sonatype introduced usage restrictions that limit the number of package downloads, throttle the API requests, and even block background Chocolatey CLI traffic if you exceed those thresholds. And that's in the community edition, right? Which is to say the free edition that organizations can use without a paid license. So while internalization and privatization are supposed to solve the problems of rate limits, if you're using a package repository that has those limits in place or has recently introduced them, you're going to find yourself having some challenges with functionality because of the rate limits. So that's kind of a key point of this conversation here, right? So according to Chocolatey's internal onboarding data, they have several hundred Chocolatey for Business customers that are using Sonatype Nexus, and most of them are using the free community edition. With the new rate limits in place, a significant number of these users, which is to say a majority of the majority, will experience challenges such as broken pipeline, failed deployments, and obviously the frustration that comes with that when you weren't expecting it, right? So this isn't a theoretical concern. This is actually already happening to users already on the newest version of Sonatype Nexus community. at Inedo, we're already getting inquiries inbound for people who, before this webinar was even advertised, are saying we have to do something about our Nexus community. Can we look into your ProGet? Can we get a demo, etc.? So this is already happening. Let's talk about the implications of these rate limits, what they really mean. So the daily rate limits, see, again, these are even for internal use cases like Chocolatey, right? So if your organization hits the cap in these rate limits come into effect, any additional requests fail. So this means that Chocolatey installs, upgrades, or automated builds start returning errors. And the limit doesn't, reset at midnight. It resets a full 24 hours after you hit that rate limit. Um, so it's not just like a temporary slowdown, it is a hard block. If you hit the cap at 4 p.m. today, you can't effectively use Nexus Community or Chocolatey. You can't use them together until 4 p.m. tomorrow. So if this is like a critical, aspect of your day to day, you might as well just not even be there that day because you won't be able to do anything until that rate limit is cleared. Again, 24 hours later. Um, so it's also worth mentioning that these rate limits don't respect time zone, right? So 4 p.m. EST is 4 p.m. EST the next day if you hit that rate limit. So something to consider if you're a global company, you have dev teams in Amsterdam, London, and then New York, right? If your London team hypothetically hits the rate limit in the afternoon London time, that's like 8, 9 a.m. New York. So that entire East Coast United States team can't really do anything for the entire day. And then the London team will be able to resume their activity the next day. So you can imagine the implications for your organization if you do have those federated dev teams in different locations. Our ProGet user base, we know that there are many of them with teams in, like I already said, like in Amsterdam, and then a London, then a New York, and then a Chicago. Just depends, of course, on the different orgs. So something to consider in terms of the implications here. Um, Now you might say, well, okay, we're using Sonatype community or Nexus community. We'll just stay on the current version we're at and not update to that new version. As a tool vendor, I have to say this is a kind of a short-term strategy. Most vendors eventually do uh, end of life support for old versions, right? Usually it's like a year or two after the version when an old version hits its like second anniversary of its release. A lot of times that's when an organization will say, our users have had 2 years to get to the newest version. Um, we're not going to be able to support the old version. Engineers and support people come and go. They're not as familiar with the version that's 2 years old. So there will eventually be an end of life, I predict, for the version of Sonatype you might be using, and then you will end up on the newer version, at which point the rate limits will come into play. Or you've already updated and they're already coming into play now. So it's kind of pay me now or pay me later, as my high school chemistry teacher used to say. So you're either going to be forced eventually to move to the new version to deal with the rate limits, or you can upgrade. So either which way. So a solution to this is, you can use ProGet as your central package repository. And we can talk about ProGet and why it's a great solution in a little bit more detail. So, setup for ProGet is straightforward. Most teams are up and running in under an hour. Unlike Sonatype, ProGet has no rate limiting, so your deployments won't suddenly break when you hit one of these invisible or not necessarily expected caps. We have a free edition that covers the core needs of most Chocolatey users, and then we have commercial editions for some of those more advanced scenarios. Um, Most importantly, ProGet offers a clear, transparent upgrade path so you can scale without friction. Again, from our use case here and what Steven's going to show, we think the majority of users of Nexus community or Chocolatey for Business would be able to get their use case up and running with ProGet free. So this webinar is really showing you how to use a free resource. We can talk commercials in a separate conversation if you'd like, but we're going to show you how to get this done with ProGet free. Um, A little bit more about ProGet in general. So while we are focusing on sort of the ProGet and Chocolatey connection and migrating specifically to ProGet from Nexus, it's worth noting ProGet is more than just a private Chocolatey repository. It's a universal package manager. So you can cache and store Chocolatey packages, NuGet, NPM, Docker containers, or even Python or Maven packages. You can manage them all in one place with central management of internal and external packages. You can set up rules for what packages are approved to be used by the developer populace. You can scan for vulnerabilities or known vulnerabilities in those open source packages. You can track exactly which packages are being used where. So it's really helpful in enterprise environments where you need governance, visibility, and control in for Chocolatey and more. So your whole software supply chain can benefit from using something like ProGet. We also have a self-hosted, self-managed version. You can deploy it in your own server, in your own location, or on the cloud. We also have a managed service version available. So easy to install, not a big learning curve, free version that you can take advantage of and get your core use case done. So I think we'll leave it there and I think dive into the demo real quick. Sorry, final comment on that. We do have people who are like, I don't know, migrating tools is always inherently risky. That's exactly what this demo we're about to show is intended to solve is how easily you can and with minimal risk you can move from Sonatype if you are affected by these rate limits to ProGet, right? It's a fair concern to be worried about migrating from tools. It's easier than you probably expect. And in this demo, Steven's going to show you exactly how to do that. So he's obviously been with Chocolatey for a number of years. He knows this stuff a lot better than I do in terms of what he's about to show. So I will kick it over to him. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Steven, if you want to jump on in and share yours. And you are muted also, Case.
Yeah, too
Yep,
many
there we go.
buttons. Too many buttons to click
Too
all at
many
one time.
buttons.
All right, too many buttons. All right, so let's go ahead and migrate from Sonatype Nexus into Inedo ProGet. Um, we're going to do this a couple of different ways. I'm going to show you uh, the built-in web UI pointy clicky button way to do it inside of Inedo ProGet's web interface. And because Chocolatey is built on PowerShell, and all of us over here at Chocolatey love PowerShell, I've written a PowerShell script that will help you migrate one or more repositories at a time from Sonatype Nexus over to Inedo ProGet, and then we'll show you how to leverage Chocolatey for Business features, that package internalizer, to very specifically kind of pick and choose what packages you migrate from a repository in Sonatype over to Inedo ProGet. This is a pretty good opportunity to clean house, for lack of a better word. Or at least I always find a migration to be a good time to clean house, right? You might have 1,000 packages in your repository, but only 700 of them are in use. So there are ways with the tool set that you can kind of bring over what you want and forget about the rest of them and kind of start fresh with that new repository in Inedo ProGet. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go into my Sonatype repository and I'm going to log in because I require authentication in my repository to even see anything. So I'm going to log in. You can see my usage center. You can see where I'm at with everything. We're going to click browse to show all of the repositories that I have created. We're actually going to look at 3 of them. I had 2 of them earlier, but I decided let's do a third one so that I can show one more demo. We've got this third-party apps repository, which contains a couple of dependencies and then some pretty common packages like Firefox, Git, Notepad++, VS Code, etc. And there's some duplication in here as well. But our Chocolatey internal repository, that's repository that contains all of the Chocolatey components that I use inside of my lab here. So, we've got all of our licensed components, a couple other extra things and some dependencies, etc. And then we've got this super awesome production repo, which I just added a few minutes ago before this webinar started. And I threw in a couple of extra packages in here as well. So we've got a Foxit Reader, Google Chrome, Pagoodle, as the Inedo folks like to call their command line utility, and a couple of others. So we're going to show you a couple of different ways to migrate these three repositories from Sonatype over to Inedo. And the first one we're going to do is this third-party apps repository. So I'm going to copy this URL because I'm going to need it in a second. Actually, let me copy the app. Buttons. We're going to copy this one because we're going to need it in a second. So I don't have to go back here. So we are going to migrate this third-party apps repo in ProGet. So inside of ProGet, what I'm going to do is log in so I have the ability to create feeds. So I'm going to log in as my admin account. We're going to click this feeds button, and then I'm going to click create new feed. Now, ProGet has this really handy thing in it, which other repositories don't have, which is Chocolatey specific feed type. It's just like NuGet, but they call it out specifically. I think that's kind of nice. So we're going to use that, and because we're not going to connect this to an upstream and make this a proxy repository like you're used to calling it inside of Sonatype Nexus, or I think JFrog calls them proxies as well. Um, we're not going to do that. This is going to be a private repository, so I'm going to click no connectors, and then we're going to give this repository a name. And since I called it third-party apps in the Sonatype Nexus instance, I'm going to call it third-party apps in my ProGet feed or my ProGet instance as well. I'm going to create that feed. I'm not going to select either of these just for the sake of time here, but you do have the ability to turn on some security vulnerability scanning and open source license detection features inside of ProGet Free. It's more capable on the paid version, but it does have the ability to do it on the free version as well. But we only care about bringing the packages over, so we're not going to dive into the bells and whistles too much. So I'm going to set those features, and there are no packages in this feed currently. So what I'm going to do is hover over this drop down arrow, and I'm going to say add a package. And in this little modal that pops up, I'm going to use the bottom option, which is bulk import packages from another feed. I'm not using JFrog Artifactory or ProGet here. I'm using Sonatype. So I'm going to select the other URL. And then I am going to, oh, dang it. I did have the right URL in the first place. Silly, silly, silly. So we do this. There we go. Now, the one thing that I'm going to do that's different when I make this copy, I want to use the NuGet v3 endpoint rather than the NuGet v2 endpoint, just because Chocolatey works a little bit better with NuGet v3 endpoints in Sonatype Nexus and ProGet than it does using NuGet v2, particularly because NuGet v2 has some deprecated APIs inside of it. So I'm going to say index.json at the end of this URL, and that's going to instruct the migrator to use a v3 endpoint instead of the v2 endpoint. If you're familiar with NuGet and v2 v3 differences in Chocolatey in general, you've probably seen a NuGet v3 endpoint end in index.json. It's the same thing here. And because my Sonatype instance requires authentication, I'm going to provide that here as well. I'm just going to use my admin account because it's got permissions for everything and the password's really short. So I'm going to provide that, and then we're going to select our options. Now I'm not going to select anything here, but we will go through it. I do want to just bring absolutely everything from that repository over, so I'm going to leave this box checked. But you do have the ability to um, control the import a little bit. You can say, hey, only bring over 1,000 of them. Um, you can overwrite packages. So if you're migrating packages from a Sonatype Nexus instance into a ProGet repository that already has some stuff in it, maybe you've got VLC in both places, the incoming package will overwrite the package that is inside of the existing ProGet feed if you tick this box. And then you also have the ability to filter out packages as well. So if you don't want certain packages to come across in the import, you can filter them here. So I'm not going to make, like I said, I'm not going to make any changes to any of this. I'm just going to confirm that import, and then I'm going to click the begin import button, and this is going to kick off. Now, earlier, while we were working through this, the demo gods were not very friendly to me in the screen and actually showing it going through. I had to refresh a bunch of times to actually see that the execution completed. So I'm just going to mash this refresh button until I see it kick over, or actually I will go back to the executions and we can see that that import feed worked. I have a feeling this is my fault. Something's going on, but we can see that in just about 11 seconds, it brought all of those 14 packages in that feed over to ProGet. So if we look in our feeds now and we go to that third-party apps repository, we've got those 14 packages. And if we look, it's brought all of those things over. So using the web interface of ProGet to migrate packages from one repository to another is really, really quick, really, really painless, and pretty flexible too with those package filters and limits, etc. But what if you got more than one repository, right? I've got a couple of them over here that I want to do. We've already done this third-party apps repository, but we've got this Chocolatey internal repository and this super awesome prod repo as well that we want to migrate. So it's possible to use PowerShell to do this migration as well. And that's what this migrator.ps1 file is on my desktop. Now, I am going to use PowerShell 7 to do this because PowerShell 7 is the latest version of PowerShell and I like it. So, what I'm going to do is I am just going to show you really quickly, and actually, let me change this one thing in my copy line. I noticed a typo just now. There we go. The magic of copy and paste. So I'm going to run this migrator.ps1, and you're going to notice that this repository URL parameter, I'm providing two. So we've got that chocolatey internal URL, and we've also got that super awesome prod repo URL. And we are going to migrate both of those repositories at the same time, all the packages inside of them. And because my Sonatype instance requires credentials, I'm going to prompt for those credentials that I want to use to perform the migration. And I'm going to use a trick of Inedo ProGet to make this really, really quick and really, really painless for you, the end user. So you'll notice that I've got this drop path parameter. Inedo ProGet supports the concept of a folder on disk where you drop a chocolatey package into it and it processes it into whatever feed is associated with that drop path. So if you've got that all set up, you can just put a chocolatey package into that folder. ProGet processes it, moves it into whatever backend storage you've configured for that particular feed, and then cleans up that drop path folder of that chocolatey package so you're not duplicating data in two places. It's really, really slick, and it allows for pretty seamless migration from Sonatype Nexus repository into a brand new Inedo ProGet feed. And you'll notice that I'm not doing anything to like create the ProGet feeds or anything like that. I'm going to do that all automatically using ProGet's command line tools. And I can do that because I know the shape of a Sonatype Nexus URL. I know that the repository name is going to be in the URL and where it's going to be at in that URL. So with some regex, you can kind of pull things out of here and then use that information to create the feeds on the fly if they need to be created. And then as an additional kind of quality of life thing, there's this show migration status flag that will give you like a list of all the packages that got migrated and then what their status was, whether they worked, whether they didn't, whatever. So let's go ahead and run this. And then this will take a couple of seconds to kind of go get everything and then start creating that information. So you'll notice that we looked for that Chocolatey internal feed, couldn't find it, so we created it, and then it is processing the C drop Chocolatey internal folder location. So if we were to open our C drive and go to that drop folder, it's probably going to be done by the time I get here, but sometimes not. Yeah. So it's processing all this stuff. Eventually, this folder is going to be emptied. Should be just about done. Usually, it doesn't take very long. And of course, when I'm showing it off live, it takes longer than it usually does, but let's see what happens. While we're waiting on that, what I can do is show you over here in ProGet. If we click on feeds, we've got that Chocolatey internal repository has been created. And then all of those packages from that internal repository are in here. So you'll notice that there were 25, now there's 32. So that tells me that everything is processed out of here. And then after it was done doing that one, it moved on and it did the other super awesome prod repo as well. So if we go back here and go to feeds, we should see that super awesome prod repo as well. And I don't see any of the packages in there yet, so it must still be chewing on stuff in there. So that's how you can migrate between Sonatype Nexus and Inedo ProGet, both using the web interface of Sonatype Nexus or Inedo ProGet, and then also using this PowerShell script that I've written here. And we are going to provide the script, so if you've registered for this webinar, you'll get a follow-up email after the webinar is over with a link to a GitHub repository that's going to have the code for this in it. That way you don't have to reinvent the wheel or anything like that, and you can just run this in your environment. With that all done, one thing that I'm going to do just to show you that it does in fact work, let's go ahead and add a ProGet source to this machine, and then let's look for all the packages on that particular feed. And this should come back. Oh, did I screw that URL up? I did screw that URL up, didn't I? Hold on, I made a typo in a URL. Super awesome repo. Thank you. Demos are fun. Nothing to change. Config already set. Fine. Choco search source that. Oh, please tell me. What in the world? Super awesome prod repo. Well, I don't understand why that is not showing those packages. It's probably because I added something last minute and it's not very happy with me. But all the packages are there. So moving on to showing you the Choco download command. We'll just skip right over it. So I'm going to use the super awesome prod repo and just as my example, and say that I only want to pull out Foxit Reader and Google Chrome. So let's go back to my demo box here and let's clear my screen and let's go here. Let's make their demo and let's do the, so you'll notice when I run the Choco command here, I've only got Choco 2.4.3. So let me switch boxes real quick. To my licensed box for this. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, cool. So I want to Choco download. I say Google Chrome and what was the other one that I said? Foxit Reader, I believe was the other one that I wanted. Just double check. Yeah, Foxit Reader. So we're going to say Google Chrome and Foxit Reader. And I am going to say my source is, no, not that one. We're going to go from the super awesome prod repo index.json. Yeah, my username and password are super complex, right? And then I'm going to not internalize these because they're already internalized. So what that's going to do is go out to that Sonatype repository and oops, that is not the right slash there. So we'll show this and then we will open the demo folder here. So this just shows you that you can kind of piecemeal what you want to come across. And you'll notice that I asked for Google Chrome and Foxit Reader, but I actually got Google Chrome, Foxit Reader, Chocolatey Core extension, and the compatibility extension. It's because the Choco download command is aware of package dependencies. So when you Choco download something using the package internalizer feature, it makes sure that you have absolutely everything you need to install that package. You can get around this and only download the packages that you care about. If you say ignore dependencies. And what that'll do is only download in this case, the Google Chrome and then the Foxit Reader package. Now, once you've got those packages downloaded locally here, you still would need to upload those into your ProGet instance. But this allows you, I just really wanted to show you the flexibility of the download command You could integrate this into the script that we're going to provide to you to do it this way instead of how the script is currently working. Um, but it's just, again, another arrow in your quiver of tools that you can use to migrate from one repository solution to the other. In this case today, from Sonatype Nexus over to Inedo ProGet. I'm going to pause there and look for some questions. It looks like Mike has already answered quite a few of them, and I just saw the request to zoom in on the desktop. Apologies. Um, it's a bit late to do that now, but let me see if I can zoom it a little bit. So there's that one, and then let me zoom in on the uh, PowerShell windows as well. So do this one. Let me go ahead and just bump this to 24. So we'll play here. And then if I need to do anything to answer questions, we're good in Zoom now. So that's done. And yes, so will this be recorded and made available on your YouTube? Yeah, we are going to record this webinar. It's being recorded right now. Um, we will send it out as an on-demand thing to everybody who's registered for the webinar after the fact once the video is all done and up on YouTube, and then it'll be on YouTube for perpetuity as well. So yes, we will be doing that. Is it best to stand up a new server for ProGet or use our existing Nexus server? Um, I would highly recommend you stand up a new one just because there will be quite a bit of disk space required if you're doing ProGet and Nexus side by side. Um, you should have no problems like performance wise running both side by side while you do migration, but the way that Sonatype Nexus stores the the packages inside of like their blob store is what they call the backend storage. Um, it's really tricky to figure out what lines up with what to be able to like say, hey, go find this and then just move the file and do magic that way. So I would really, really, really highly recommend that you just stand up a new box and migrate over to it. It's going to save you a whole lot of hassle and potentially some some headache as well if you run out of disk space while you are doing the migration. If you need help with that though, let us know. Both us at Chocolatey and Mike's team over at ProGet or at Inedo will be able to help you stand that ProGet server up and do the migration. Done. So this question is on Sonatype. Disk space was a real issue after upgrading from V2 to V3, and their cleanup policies were locked behind a paywall. So I'm going to let Mike answer this a little bit further, but the cleanup policies in Sonatype shouldn't be locked but behind a paywall. I know that Sonatype Nexus cleanup policies are more of a soft delete than a hard delete, meaning that the entries are removed from the database, but the actual data itself, the nupkegs, aren't removed from disk unless you run a cleanup task that needs enabled. So there, that might just be a misconfiguration. But Mike, can you speak to the cleanup stuff inside of ProGet? Because I know it has it.
Yeah, so that is there are retention policies you can put in place to dynamically manage package usage. You can do, there's a number of different things I can send over the documentation. It is worth mentioning that is a part of our basic, which is to say a commercially licensed version of ProGet, but you can do different things like if it hasn't been used in 30 days, then removed, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different things that we recommend users do in terms of retention policies or retention rules rather, to manage their disk space. When you say, is there a way to do that without I mean, the answer, I guess, is that there is not a way to do that with retention rules with ProGet. We definitely could hear from you in our forums if there's some other alternative method that is not using ProGet's, feature for that, that might work. That would be a separate thing. So that would be if you're trying to use the free version of ProGet and also more dynamically manage the storage space. There might be something we could have you chat with an engineer in our forums. Worth mentioning before we dive into the questions or whatnot. Didn't want to take up too much time talking about Inedo as a company, but worth mentioning. So Inedo's the company behind ProGet. We are a bootstrapped company. We only answer to our users. We don't have outside funding that's trying to tell us what we should be doing. So feature enhancements, the overall roadmap of what our products are doing are defined by our commercial users. Another thing worth knowing is we do not have a dedicated support team who are not product engineers. So maybe another way of putting it is our support team are our product engineers. So when you create a ticket with some other companies, they spend time shuffling the ticket around to find the best way to help you, and that comes at the expense of your time. At Anita, when you create a ticket, a product engineer who's intimately familiar with our code base is immediately looking at it. Obviously, some tickets take longer to resolve than others, but at least the person who is immediately looking at it is someone who knows how to get started and help you. So that's a big sort of difference between us and some of the other packages out there or companies out there. So that's just worth mentioning. We do have very active forums where some of the questions for our free users can be posted, and an engineer will respond to our forums post. And to be honest, the SLA is pretty similar to our ticketed support. But just an FYI. So if I can't answer the question, we can definitely either get back to you later or we can have you go to our forum. So just to dive in back to these questions. Stephen, was there one that you wanted to answer? Should I try to kind of jump into some of
Um,
these?
we can jump into some of them. So let's do the couple from Brandon Prey. There's the first one
Sure.
being, does ProGet use SQL for log management like Nexus did?
So I'm gonna be honest, the I don't know if I can exactly answer this question. So you do have to have SQL as a database to use ProGet. We are rolling out support for PostgreSQL in our next version, which will be out very soon, if not by let's mid-June is our goal. The purpose of that Postgres support is to simplify self-management by eliminating the need for a separate database setup and maintenance, as ProGet will ship within embedded self-contained database that requires minimal user intervention. But for right now, all instances of ProGet do need a SQL or SQLite database. In terms of the log management, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question in that I guess I don't fully know what you mean by using SQL for log management, but I can comment you do have to use SQL. So I haven't heard people say, have you, do you use SQL for log management? I guess I can't quite tell. Am I answering the question by saying you have to have a SQL database to use ProGet or SQLite?
I'm going to go with probably yes.
Probably. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Last question. How can we manage package versions within ProGet? Each night Jenkins will download the latest version of Chrome so we can set up ProGet to clean up their. You can do something extremely similar. If we want to connect offline and talk to you about getting set up with like a trial or using our free version, we can definitely get you the right documentation or chat about that. But long story short, this is functionality. I mean, the exactly how to do it, I can't answer, but I can tell you that this is a very similar bit of functionality that can be done with ProGet. and very easy to do if you're familiar with Sonatype Nexus. Hopefully that's a reasonable answer for the moment.
Cool.
Uh,
And the last question that we've got so far is the plan to replace Nexus in the C4B quick start scripts with ProGet. C4B quick start for those not familiar. So we've got two environments that we create at Chocolatey to allow you to quickly get up and running with Chocolatey for Business. One being an on-prem version via our quick start guide environment, which is just now a single PowerShell script that kind of downloads and installs everything you need to be successful with Chocolatey. Sonatype Nexus being one of those as the repository server. There are plans in the future to extend that to allow you a choice of a repository solution. So we're still going to keep Sonatype Nexus around because people use it and they pay for it, and the free version works for small customers, and it's a good option, and we don't want to alienate anybody from Chocolatey's perspective. So we're always going to have Sonatype Nexus. We are planning and working towards having Inedo ProGet be an option. The first hurdle was to have Inedo ProGet available as a Chocolatey package and installable via Chocolatey on the Chocolatey community repository. My team has solved that problem, so that package is now available. We help maintain that package, so that's done. And the last bit of the puzzle that we're trying to work through is the automation of setting up the feeds and the security and all that stuff. The same way that we set up the repositories and the security in Sonatype Nexus. We want the experience to be the exact same when you run through the environment, no matter which repository vendor you use. So as we add more repository vendors to the solutions, you're going to have the ability to choose between um, your solution of choice, basically. So yes, we are not going to replace, but we are going to augment with ProGet in the future. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. I can't give you an ETA because we kind of work on it as we have time in terms of automating the install. But it is something we are actively working on and working towards. So I'm hopeful by the end of the year we see it land and it's there, but I can't guarantee that, and that may slip into next year or even further. So just a heads up on that. Um, so the last question that I think we're going to have time for here is can I upload all sorts of file formats in the same repository? I had to have a raw repo in Nexus to upload larger zip artifacts. Yes, that the same rules apply no matter what repository solution you choose, whether it's Sonatype, whether it's Inedo, whether it's JFrog. Repositories are very format specific. So a NuGet format repository supports NuGet format packages, Cocoa, PyPy, Ruby gems, whatever. The repository is very specific, but all of the repository vendors, Inedo included, have the concept of a raw or generic repository. Inedo calls them asset folders or asset directories
mhm.
that that are basically just a web-based file share. You dump whatever you want in there, and then you can get to it from a URL. Exact same concept as a raw repository inside of Nexus. So yes, if that's a concern, if you've got a repository that houses packages that don't include the installers, you've got another raw repository that houses like the zip archives of say the installers or the ancillary information that a package needs. You can do that with ProGet. Now, you won't be able to do that migration with the migration script that I'm going to provide you, but if you I'm sure post to the forums of Inedo, or if you're a Chocolatey for Business customer and you have a support contract, you put in a ticket with us, we can help you do that migration because it's really not that much different code wise to do that work. but it would be different enough that it's not something that the script in its current shape can support. But we can help you get it there. All right, folks. That is it for the questions. Uh, Mike, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, if you opted in to hear from us when you registered, because obviously Chocolatey hosted this here webinar, then we'll be sending you a quick email just saying thanks, and it'll include the best way to get in touch. That's so if you did that, I'm sure Chocolatey will also be sending out a very similar-ish email, so that will be a way to kind of keep the lines of communication open. And otherwise, it was really great connecting with everyone here today. I appreciate the questions, and again, I'll be happy again via LinkedIn or email to connect with people about this.
Awesome. And
Thanks a lot, Stephen.
likewise, yeah, absolutely. Mike, I can't thank you enough for joining us and taking us through this migration strategy. It's really important that our customers are happy and are aware of a problem that could potentially impact them and that they have a path forward, right? So really, really appreciate you joining us today.
You
As
sure?
Mike said, we are going to be sending a follow-up email after this, which will include links to resources, including how to get help from both Inedo and Chocolatey. A link to the GitHub repository where we will have the scripts and some other, like the examples using the Choco download command, as will all be in there as well. So, again, thanks everybody for joining. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll catch you at the next one. Take care.